Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 15 or 16 of Inbound Now. I don't know yet. I'm losing track. I have a very special guest today, Mr. Joe Pulizzi. So Joe is a content marketing evangelist. He's the co-author of Get Content, Get Customers. He's the founder of Junta 42 and ContentMarketingInstitute.com. And, you know, he has a great blog over there on Junta 42 that's usually listed on the Ad Age 150 list, which is a great accomplishment. So I'm glad to have you here on the show, Joe.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So I wanted to get you on to talk all things content marketing and why businesses should be thinking about their content strategy and really how they can leverage content to kind of grow and further their business goals. Sound good?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just let me know. I can go right into my definition of content marketing, or we can go wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, so, all right, let's start there. What is content marketing in your mind?
You know, the easiest way to look at content marketing is the idea that marketers are now publishers. If I was going to put it as an elevator pitch, what I would say is, like it or not, you're a publisher today. And then you got to go into, well, what does that mean? It's the idea, simply put, is that customers don't have 3 seconds for our sales pitch today, but they'll take 30 minutes for a good story. And that's really what we're talking about today. We as brands that sell products and services, we've got to tell really compelling, relevant stories. So it's the idea is, how can we as part of our marketing program create valuable, compelling, and relevant content, multiple channel, we're not just talking about web here, we're talking about in-person, print, and mobile, and anything else that you can think of, iPad device. How can we create that type of content to attract and retain customers on a consistent basis? I mean, we're all doing it. I mean, according to research that you've done, that we've done at the Content Marketing Institute, everybody's doing this today, but they're not doing it all that well in a lot of cases. You've got a lot of content, you've got a lot of clutter going on, so there's a big opportunity for those companies that commit to it and say, yes, I want to be the trusted expert in my niche. And if they want to do that to grow their business, they've got to create some really amazing content. And that content, simply put, has to be as good as anything else in their niche. Or, you know, why are your customers going to pay attention to that?
Right. So speaking of some of those mistakes, what do you see companies making, you know, content marketing wise? What mistakes do you see?
Oh, boy, how much time do you have? So one is not consistent. You see bursts, you see campaign bursts. So you have a lot of companies that have this campaign mentality where they'll do something for 3 months or 6 months. Like, you know, see some brands out there they'll do Facebook content programs for 3 months and then they'll stop. Well, you know, content is a promise to your customers. You have to be consistent about it. That's what we've learned from media companies out there. They don't stop their content, and they're very consistent about it. So one is consistency. Two is sales pitch. You have so many companies that want to sell in their content, and it frankly doesn't work. Once your customers get a sniff that this is more salesy, I mean, they're very accepting. Most, you know, according to a lot of the research we see, there was actually just some research out last week from the Custom Content Council, and they talked about the fact that consumers are okay with sales pitches as long as the information is relevant and valuable. Right? So we've got to make sure that it's relevant and valuable, and they know that it's coming from a brand and know that ultimately there's a marketing goal behind it. But it's got to be relevant and compelling. I know a lot of brands out there that they'll just say, oh, no, we've got to get our product mentioned in here or there. You know, it's not going to work out for the most part, because as soon as you do that, you're probably not relevant and valuable anymore. So the other thing is they're only focusing on one channel. I mean, you got to think about where your customers are hanging out. Back in, this is about I've been in this business too long, 2001, 2002, we saw this big migration from print custom magazines over to online. Not that that was wrong necessarily, but they just abandoned all that consistent content that they were doing, and they said, oh, we're going to do all this new stuff because online is cheaper and you guys are all online. Well, in a year later, they were all coming back to print because they said, well, our customers weren't migrated on the web yet. They weren't there. They weren't hanging out there. Today, you got to think about, where are your customers hanging out? What social networks are they on? What forums are they on? Are they still getting the postal service? Is there an opportunity in print? Is there a missing event in your industry that you could put together and be a part of and coordinate and create some great content around that and position yourself as an expert? So those are just a few of them, but I think the overall we're very used to thinking like marketing people, which is we want to sell. And with content marketing, we have to first think about the needs and the pain points of our customers and create content that answers those questions. And if we do that right, they then pay attention to us, they then buy from us, they then talk about us. It's easy to talk about, it's hard to do.
Right, right. So it's really about more, becoming that resource where people, you're giving them all, like, the answers to their questions, and maybe even telling them how to do what your, business does. But in the end, they're probably going to be like, you know what, it's too much work. We're going to hire you guys to do it. The company providing the content, right? Is that kind of the idea there?
Well, I mean, and frankly, when we talk to brands, I don't care who does it. If they can do it internally, that's fantastic. Most brands, 55% of brands outsource some part of the content marketing process. So we know that that's going on right now. But, it doesn't matter, if they do it themselves or they do it outside. Sometimes it's easier to do a little bit of both. What we see in a lot of bigger brands is they have a content coordinator, or maybe it's under social media, whoever that's under, and then they work with a lot of journalists or a lot of content agencies to get out that work. Because let's say that a brand like a Procter & Gamble wanted to do a custom magazine. Well, does Procter & Gamble have a production designer, graphic designer, a project manager, an editorial director that understands how to produce a magazine and understands how to integrate that in the marketing process? Probably not. And there's no need to hire those full-time probably if you're just doing a quarterly magazine. So you outsource that. Now, if you're doing let's say a twice daily or 3-time daily blog, you might say, well, we might have enough work for that position, and we can insource that into our company. Plus, we want that to be part of the culture of the company, so we're going to hire that position. I think it really doesn't matter how you source it. I think it matters, are you committed to doing it? Does your C-level marketing team buy into it? And then are you going to be consistent in doing it and integrate that with the rest of your marketing?
Right, right. So you're talking about old school mediums too, like print, and how companies were creating a bunch of stuff. They switched to online, then they switched back. When companies are transitioning from traditional onto online stuff, do you see a lot of companies just basically putting their TV ad on YouTube and thinking that's gonna cut it? What do you see? What advice would you give to companies like basically repurposing that content or changing it up for the web?
Yeah, repurposing, repackaging is a big question right now. Most companies that we talk to actually have a ton of content, but they just haven't told the story with that content correctly. Like, you've got content going on all over. Let me give you some examples. You have salespeople out there right now that are talking about problems with customers. If you're in B2B, it's happening right now. You have customer service people dealing with support issues all the time. There's great content going on right there. The answer to that problem on the customer support line, that is a piece of content. But in both those cases, the processes probably aren't set up to capture that content. That's what we need. How do we set up a process to capture that content? Is that person taking that, answering that down, putting it into an FAQ section on site? Is that a possibility to have that be a blog post? Are you sending out your salespeople with Kodak ZI-8s or flip cams where they can do an interview at the end of their meeting? Which, by the way, in all the companies I've talked to that do that, the customers love getting interviewed by the salespeople. They love it. They think they're I'm going to be on a blog. That's great. They give their permission. They sign it over, and it's fantastic. What a great way to involve your customers in your story, which is also their story as well. So I think that we have the content. There's no shortage of it. It's just how do we set up a process within our company so we can extract that story and figure out, okay, what's the really important things that we need to tell our customers and which channels should we use? Because if it's a long-form story, long-form meaning, let's say it's a 3,000-word story, well, that might be better for digital magazine, might be better for print magazine, might be better to scope that out as a white paper. That's definitely not a blog post. I see some 3,000-word blog posts, and I just shake my head. I'm like, oh, no, you're using the medium wrong. So it's things like that. You brought up the idea of commercial. I don't have any problem with a company taking their commercials and putting it on YouTube, but don't have any expectations that a lot of people are going to watch that. Use that as more of an archival resource. I talked to a contractor the other day that had something like 40 or 50 commercials. Great. I said, great, put those on, but don't think that people are going to rush to YouTube and search for all kinds of stuff and find you. They might get a couple. It might help in some parts of the sales process, but probably not. What's more effective is if you are answering your customers' pain points through a piece of video content that you probably didn't have before.
Right, right. Okay, cool. So once the light bulb goes off and companies realize that they need to get on this, content marketing train, right? Because it's answering customers' questions, it's helping them be found more in search, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many benefits to it. After they kind of do an internal audit of what content they might already have, where else should they start? Where would you suggest?
Well, I think the first thing you want to start with is what are the people in your company that are already used to telling these kinds of stories? And reach out to the people in your company that are already doing blogging, that are already active on social media. Those people are already used to being open and telling their story. Well, why don't you get them on your team and get them to start blogging for your company and start promoting your company? Because if they're already doing it, the odds are that they're probably more than willing to do it. There's actually a company in your area that I love to talk about, OpenView Venture Partners, that they've got 90% of their employees that are actively blogging. They started there. That was the start of they made the blog the center of their entire content marketing strategy. Then they took that blog and then they added videos to it. They would bring thought leaders and customers in to talk about their problems, and they cut those videos up into a-minute segments. They started to create ebooks and white papers. So they started with getting their employees involved in that, and then they scoped that around an overall strategy. So that's all great, but what OpenView teaches everyone, every small, medium, or large-sized businesses, you got to start with a strategy, just like everything else. I mean, content marketing, inbound marketing is no different than any other marketing strategy or philosophy that you have to start with. What are my objectives? What behaviors do I want to see out of my customers, and how am I going to measure success? You got to at least start with somewhere. You might change it along the way, but if you don't start with, where am I going to go with this thing, and what are our ultimate expectations, you're going to fail. So you got to start off with your strategy, and then you can think tactical. I see a lot of brands out there, they start with, let's do a blog. That's great. It's fantastic, but what is it going to do for your business? You better have it written down somewhere, because if you don't, somebody's going to get lost along the way.
Right, and setting those benchmarks. So talking about, the benchmarks and the goals, what would be some metrics that you would say would be a good kind of point to kind of, where do we need to move the needle to? What metrics would you say?
So I always like to use this, I use return on objective, ROO. I'm pretty tired of return on investment. I think it's overused and it's about a meaningless term at this point. Return on objective seems to resonate a little bit better with marketers, because they're like, oh yeah, what's my marketing objective? And then how am I going to measure that objective? So just be very, very, very linear with it. Okay, well, if I'm focusing on ROO, what's the first thing I want to see? Probably sales, right? Everybody's like, okay, well, can you actually measure sales? Can you measure through the pipeline where somebody signs up for a lead and touches that content along the way, and then at the end of the day, you can show some kind of purchase behavior, right? Great. You can do that, right? You guys know you can use HubSpot software. If you could do that.
Hey, there you go.
Not the picture stuff. You could use that along some kind of a marketing automation system where you can figure that out. Great. Okay. Well, let's say that it's not attraction marketing. Let's say it's some kind of nurturing, or let's say that it's retention marketing. Well, can you figure out how many times they touched a certain piece of content, and then you can figure out what their behavior is after that. If you look at total big picture, you can look at things like rankings in search engine. And search engine rankings is a great thing to look at. Website traffic is fine. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm still concerned about conversions. I want to see people to take behaviors. So, website traffic can show you some indications that you're doing things right, but at the end of the day, what's your conversion rate? Same thing for social media. I love people sharing our content. I love the retweets. I love the shares on Facebook. But at the end of the day, we look just like you do. You look at the end of the day, what's the percentage of people that have converted from content coming in through those sites? I'm very cognizant of that from an attraction standpoint. But I also know that we've got a lot of current customers in the system that we want to keep our customers.
Right.
And the content's important, but it's different kind of content. So it might be, and that's where it gets a little bit more complicated, where you might need help from the outside, because attraction content is different than retention content. So attraction content, yeah, you're doing all this thing. You want to be found in search engines for the right keywords, and you're going to be sending out blog posts, and you've got content that's being spread through Facebook and Twitter. That's fantastic. Well, on the retention side, you might look at things like a print loyalty magazine, which, by the way, I've been doing print magazines for over a decade now, and for the most part, they work if you do them right because it's a loyalty vehicle. You would never, ever use a print magazine as a lead vehicle. That's where some people get mixed up. That is a loyalty vehicle. An event is another loyalty or upselling type of vehicle. So look at what your goals are, what your objectives are, and then obviously for the event, you're looking at, what's the spend of those customers that went to your event versus the customers that didn't. You can actively show return on those things. Same thing for print. Do an A/B study. And by the way, it doesn't have to be just print. You could do a white paper as well. So let's say it's a digital white paper, online things.
We're a fan of the digital stuff over here, but yeah.
But I mean, like for us, we do a print magazine, but we also have 6 or 7 different digital versions of that magazine. We've got podcasts that are integrated with that magazine. We've got white papers integrated with that. That's all online. So even though one of the channels is print, you've got there's no such thing as a print magazine today. You've got so much digital wrapped up in the integration of that. You just got to make sure you know what your objectives are. So I would just say focus on what your objective is. And first of all, you can focus on some kind of a behavior. It doesn't have to be a sales behavior. It'd be nice if it is. But at the end of the day, what's their behavior? Are they making actions? And then can you show that as some kind of an increase in some portion of your key performance indicators?
Right. I think you lay out an important point there. Thinking about your content, before the sale, bringing them into your site, and then post sale, all that content that's going to keep them a happy customer and keep them engaged with your company, and re-upping subscriptions or whatever it may be, or upselling. There's a lot of things you can do there, and thinking about those in different ways is, I think, really important that you point out there.
Well, on just one more thing, on the government side, Oracle does some really good work with white papers and webinars. So when somebody goes in, and it's something like if they get to 3 different combinations of the right webinars and white papers, they're sent a whole different slew of content. That's a lot of work to do that, but that's really impressive because what they've said is, hey, this person is set up for this kind of a content because they're interested in A, B, and C, so we're going to send them X, Y, and Z. So that's a whole marketing automation and you have to have the content to prepare for that. And if you don't have the strategy to start with, you can't do the X, Y, and Z content.
Right. So producing content is hard, right? It's hard work to make great content. There's no doubt about it. So, ideas for content. Where do you kind of pull inspiration from? Where would you give companies advice to kind of start thinking about content and creating it?
Well, so you start with your customers. I always say, what keeps your customers up at night? If you don't know the answer to that for your business, you might be in the wrong business. So, but let's say you don't. So how do you find out your customers' pain points? I'm a big fan of I call them readership studies. You can call them whatever you want to, but we see a lot of customer satisfaction surveys go out to our customers. I say, well, hold off on one of those for a second and send them like a readership survey. Figure out what their pain points are. What are their biggest challenges? You'd be surprised with what your customers give you. And frankly, if you did that one thing, you'd probably have enough content ideas to last you a year. But let's just say that you don't from that, because they're more than willing to give you ideas on that. Talk to your salespeople. Talk to the front line. Most of the salespeople that I talk to, the marketing department is not going to them and getting their input about what the challenges are of the customers. Customer support, talk to them. You've got to have a process, whether you use a tool like a Yammer or whether you just have an ongoing communication project management tool where you're talking to them and getting this kind of feedback. Fantastic. Then just do your basic, if you want to call it social media monitoring or online listening. Your customers are talking all over the place online. Whether you use a Radiant 6 or you use Scout Labs, or whether you even use a Google Alerts, TweetDeck, Hootsuite combination, or whatever the case is, you can listen actively right now with what's going on with your customers and probably have enough there for content ideas. It's not a shortage of content ideas. It's a shortage of focus by the marketing department. It's now important enough we need to focus on that, so you've got all the content ideas. Then get your content coordinator, chief content officer, whoever you call them, to then take that and put that into an editorial calendar. Make sure that editorial calendar goes about 3 months. You can always change it. But you should have content ideas going out for 3 months, and that means your white papers, your webinars, your blog posts, all those things are already set for 3 months so that you can coordinate with the rest of your marketing program.
Okay, cool. Yeah, one of my questions I had for you here was, on your blog, you always talk about having an editorial calendar. You're a big fan of it. So what tools do you use as your content calendar? Just a regular, Google Calendar, or like?
It's funny. I have talked to probably 6 or 7 companies, and we just haven't done it. But I've said, hey, somebody out there should be creating an editorial calendar, because I think there's a huge opportunity, because there's not a perfect system out there. There are some good tools. A central desktop has a really good tool that you could use. You could use something like a Basecamp. We frankly use Google Docs and Excel because it's just we're a small company. It's easy to do that, and there's no excuses that way. You don't have to say, oh, we don't have a fancy editorial calendar system. You don't need one. You frankly just need to make sure that who's responsible for it at the end of the day, and who's keeping track of it and sends out reminders. Central Desktop is a really good tool because it's a project collaboration tool. It's like a Microsoft project. It may be a little bit too complicated for some, but for bigger companies, it's great because then everybody gets notified. You could also do the same with Teamwork, or Basecamp has those same kind of tools as well. But if you don't want to do any of that stuff and you're cheap, just use an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, cool. So so your editorial calendar right now for your multiple blogs, how does it kind of look? It's kind of like a shared doc where you list out ideas, and then kind of someone will say, oh, I'll write about that, and that's kind of how you do it, or?
Yeah, I mean, right. So right now for Content Marketing Institute, what we do is Michelle Lynn, who's our content director, she oversees the entire editorial calendar. She keeps it in Excel, and we keep it active, and we use Dropbox. So we keep it active in Dropbox. We can go into it anytime when any changes are made. Everybody can go into it. And then we have about 70 different contributors that contribute into that blog. And then she's just coordinating that system. She's air traffic control. She's the most important person we have working on who's doing whatever, because as you know, somebody might drop out at the last minute, or we have to move, or we get in a submission that's just terrible, and we need more editing time with it. So we've got to move things around. That's why you have to be at least 3 months, at least from an idea standpoint, you have to be 1 month blocked in, and you know what's going on, because at any minute, you're like, oh, okay, what are we going to do? We got a hole here, and then you can move things up and around. So the big issue is that you got to have somebody that owns that. Michelle is the person in our company that owns that, and then can work with all those people. And from that standpoint, she makes it look easy. It's definitely not easy, but she does a fantastic job.
Right. Cool. So you have over 70 contributors to your blog. Can you give the audience any advice on how to kind of attract guest bloggers that may want to contribute to their own sites?
Well, the first thing is, we've been doing this as long as you guys have,
right,
at least in our niche. So, I mean, we didn't start out that way. I mean, I was blogging every day, just myself, for the longest time. And then when you get some traction, you get some followers, you get more and more. I had more and more people on my personal blog that wanted to contribute just because we were doing some good stuff. All right, great. But that's not what my blog is for, so that's when we created the Content Marketing Institute. I think that if you are a small company, small business, and you want to do that kind of stuff, first of all, if you target a contributor, I would not go right out and email them and say, oh, would you write for my blog? I think you need to get active in their community. You need to comment on their blog posts. They need to see you as more on the same page as them, as a friend. And then when you're active for at least a couple weeks, then you can reach out to them, and they're more than happy to talk to you that way. I've been doing that for a long, long time. As long as you get active in their community, bloggers will do a lot of things, and they're happy to support you. But if you come in from the outside and say, oh, like a PR person would, traditional PR, and say, oh, you know what, we'd love you to guest blog on our blog, you either don't get a reaction, or they say, no, we don't do that kind of stuff. But if you become almost like internet buddies, internet friends, living in our community, you can build up that list. So I would say probably the first 30 to 40 people that wanted to contribute on our blog, it was like send an email and a yes. It was so easy because we already had relationships with those people. So build a relationship first before you go out and try to get guest bloggers on your site.
Right. It's always, it's the give before you get mentality of the internet, and I think you're dead on there. Cool. So,
Gary, and real quick, it's just funny because I just read it in Rolling Stone. Gary Vaynerchuk was featured in a quote in Rolling Stone magazine, this latest issue, and he said, we've done what most companies don't want to do because it's so hard, because we build relationships one person at a time. That's what we're talking about with inbound marketing, with content marketing. You're building relationships one at a time. And it's fantastic, and it works, but it's hard work to do that. It takes time.
Right. Totally. So With content marketing moving into the future, what do you see like that's on the horizon? What should marketers be paying attention to?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're not thinking of yourself like a media company, you're doing yourself a disservice. I wouldn't call it a revolution. I'm calling it an evolution of the marketing department into a publishing department, and we are seeing that right now. Companies like I mentioned Oracle before, if you look at their marketing department, they've got a whole team of writers and journalists that they've had for a long, long time. They were a little bit ahead of the curve because they've been producing, magazines, newsletters for a long time. Same thing with a John Deere. I mean, they've been producing a newsletter for over 100 years. So those types of companies have gotten it, and they got it a while ago. Most companies are still not there yet. You see content in spurts, and you see content as part of campaigns. What I think you'll start to see, the majority of money, the resources out there do not lie in the hands of traditional media. It lies on the corporate brand side. It lies with the Microsofts, the Ciscos, the Googles, the Procter & Gamble's. They have a lot more money than traditional media. They're starting to figure out that in order to get attention from our customers, we need to really be like media companies. Not saying be like journalists. Not what I'm saying. I'm saying be like media companies and provide really helpful resources to customers on a consistent basis in video and text form and iPad and everything else. So they're starting to get that, and over the next 10 years, you're going to see that more and more of the media that's consumed by you and I are not coming from media companies, they're coming from brands. So you're going to we're seeing that evolution now. Most companies that I talk to aren't asking, why should I do it, Joe? They already know they should do it. They're asking how.
Right.
And so we're at that beginning point. I would say if this was the internet, we're looking at about 1998, 99. So we're just at the beginning. If it was a 9-inning ball game, we're just getting out of the dugout right now. So there's still a lot of time, but there's a long way to go here. So we're going to see that transition, and I think because there's no barriers to entry in technology, we're going to see it happen pretty fast here.
Right. So I just had CC Chapman on the show. He's another content marketer, and he was talking about how, like you're saying, it's about companies becoming media producers, and basically like whatever your industry is, whatever your niche is, basically making your site like the Wikipedia for that and making it the hub of information where people are going to come back and back and back. And even if they're not buying from you immediately, when they do need to make that decision, you're top of mind. And I think that's one of the key components of content marketing.
Oh, it's absolutely true. Let's say, your target is mostly small businesses. If you're a small business out there listening to this right now and you're like, how do I start from a content idea standpoint? I would say figure out the content niche, where you can be the leading expert in the world. So that means you got to get really small, right? You got to be, I'm not just an expert on pets, right? I'm an expert on pet supplies in the regional area of Cleveland, Ohio that focuses on, transportation needs. You know what? You could be the leading expert in that because we're so nichified with media today. You've got to think of yourself in content. We made that decision with content marketing. We felt we could be the experts in that. HubSpot made that decision in inbound marketing. You could be the experts in that. Worked out pretty well for both of us. So I would just say from that standpoint, a small business, you've got to don't go bigger, go smaller. You want big content ideas, but within a small niche so you can be the leading expert in that area.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great advice. So Joe, where can people find you online?
Let's see. So Content Marketing Institute, you'll find every piece of how-to information on how to help your content marketing program. Content Marketing World 2011, which HubSpot is a sponsor of.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, you got it. September 6th, 7th, and 8th in Cleveland, Ohio. It will be all about content marketing, and we have tracks for B2B, B2C, and small business associations. So we've got, that'll be, if you think why Cleveland, we'll have it at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We just announced Silent Bob himself, Kevin Smith, is going to be our entertainment speaker, so we're pretty excited about that. And then if you want to check out my blog, you can go to Junta42, JUNTA42.com, and find us there.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, thanks for coming on the show, Joe, and we hope to get you back sometime.
Hey, anytime. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, cool.